in terms of our advisory board members, Teresa Urbanzo. But let's go ahead. Welcome, everyone. I'm Julie Eklund. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning at the Coordinating Board, and I chair the ERC Advisory Board at Commissioner Keller's request. And we've got a full agenda today, so I want to jump right in. We've already been taking roll. I'm just going to read those attendees who are present, and please correct me if I missed someone. We've got Celeste Alexander with us from the UT Austin ERC. We've got Greg Branch from the UT Dallas ERC. We've got Kathy Horn from the University of Houston ERC. We have Gary Dworkin, who's one of our advisory board members. And then today, Nina Taylor is going to be substituting for Linda Rosca just for the first hour of the meeting, and she has consulted with Linda regarding Linda's wishes in terms of the proposals to be discussed. And then Angie, and I'm sorry, Angie, if you could provide your last name.
It's Stout.
Stout, I'm sorry, I didn't have that in my notes in front of me. Angie Stout is actually here from TWC today, and she's doing the same for Adam Leonard. Adam has not been able to join us, but she has discussed the proposals with Adam, and she has him available if needed. He's in another meeting. So Teresa Urbanzo is the only person who is on the board who I haven't heard from yet this morning. Teresa, were you able to join us? I guess not, and we did hear from Sarah Arispe that she would not be able to be with us today. So we do have a quorum with 7 members. The way we are actually using different technology today for our meeting. Normally we don't have video, so it's been kind of nice to see some folks. Please be advised that Teams does mute me on occasion, so Linda will let me know if that happens, and we'll get me back up and running so you're able to hear me. Also, as folks join in, if they join in the call, sometimes it does interrupt the meeting, and I will just pause while the computer system tells us that someone new is joining in, and we'll move from there. But we only have researchers and advisory board members on the call. The public access is actually through the coordinating board website through our YouTube channel. So again, welcome everyone. Good to have you all here today. I am going to work through the PowerPoint. Everyone should be able to see that, which basically has our agenda on it until we get to the end of the meeting when we have some additional information. If you are having a problem in terms of getting into the meeting, if you're a researcher or one of our board members, there's the information for emailing Linda Hargrove. Linda is also going to be guardian of the chat this morning, and the chat is open for our advisory board members. And also, if a researcher is asked a question by an advisory board member and has trouble with sound, feel free to use the chat. Okay, so I am happy again to have you all with us. You will notice for the meeting today that we are going to have our usual slate of proposals. This is the second meeting that we've had where we will have proposals for access to the ERCs, but then for many, if not all of those, there are also requests for remote access to the ERCs affiliated. So for those of you who may not have been with us, remote access was allowed by the advisory board and through a rule that went through our coordinating board last summer. Right now we have remote access for researchers at UT Austin and UT Dallas. Again, this is through a virtual machine with a lot of security measures in place. When those guidelines were passed, forwarded to our commissioner, approved by the board in terms of our rule change, we understood at the time that UT Austin and UT Dallas would be ready to move forward quickly in terms of remote access, and we ensured after approval that the information needed from those ERCs was provided to us, the documentation before we did before we allowed remote access there. We knew at the time that University of Houston would also be requesting remote access, but they weren't ready at that time. You will see several projects today to move for remote access for the University of Houston. I wanted to let everyone know on the advisory board that we do have a meeting coming up tomorrow for review by the Department of Information Resources for the state of Texas and technical experts from the University of Houston who work on the ERC and from our agency to review the materials for remote access for the Houston ERC. And so because this board did not officially approve access for the two ERCs that have access, they just approved remote access overall with the understanding that those two would come through. We are going to be meeting with University of Houston, making sure all the materials are in place, and then going forward to our commissioner with a recommendation if all of the pieces are there that this board required for remote access, and of course that the rules require. So I just wanted to let everyone know that, and when we do get to those proposals from University of Houston for remote access or the new proposals that include that, any approval will not include remote. It'll be contingent approval provided that all of the requirements are met by that ERC for remote access. So just wanted to make sure everyone understood that situation, that because of the timing for when we could get the meetings in, we didn't want to have to wait till March. So we will be reviewing those proposals, and remote access won't officially be allowed even if the board agrees for a project until all of the security requirements are in place and all of the requirements, again, that you folks approved this summer are there and confirmed. Okay, any questions there from the advisory board regarding University of Houston and how we're going to handle those remote access items as they come up? Okay, if not, then I'm going to move forward with our agenda. Okay, and we're jumping right into proposals. The first one is, in fact, Linda, correct me here. It's my understanding that this one has now become just an extension proposal. This is, this is UT Austin 107, fracking boom and human capital investment evidence from Texas. So this is simply for an extension. And,
yes.
And Linda, can you please tell me the length of the extension if you've got that available? If not,
looks like it's, I'm sorry.
No, that's
12/11/2022.
Okay, to 7/20.
12/11. December 11th, 2022.
Okay.
And originally approved September 6th, 2018.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from the advisory board regarding this extension request?
Yes, hi, this is Angie.
Yes, hi, Angie.
It does look like they requested an extension as well as additional data elements. They have two documents.
This was the
Thank
one
you.
that,
Linda? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is the one that she didn't need the data amendment, just the extension.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Sorry.
I just wanted to make sure if she needed additional data to do more analysis, was the amount of time asked for the extension going to be enough? So that's okay then.
Good question. And in fact, yeah, this is one where after we looked into this, realized that there wasn't that need for the additional data, that everything that's needed has already been allowed for access. Okay, great. Do we have a motion regarding? Thanks. Do we have a motion regarding this extension request?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Celeste.
Celeste, thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm not able to see you. If you can provide your names first. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. The extension is granted. Moving on to the next agenda item. This is UT Dallas 137. This is a request for additional data, local labor market conditions and major choice. Are there any questions regarding this additional data request? It is for TWC data.
Yeah, hi, this is Angie again from TWC.
Yeah, sure.
We just want to make sure that the researcher is clear. The wage data does not contain geographic information. So it does have zip code and county codes, but those are for the employers, not the individual wage earners. And they could also be one zip code for the corporate headquarters. So say a franchise type business like H-E-B grocery stores. There could be hundreds of actual locations, but only one zip code in the system for the corporate address.
Thank you, Angie. That's actually a really important point that I know Adam has shared with us for other projects. Greg,
Yeah.
are the researchers with us today?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, just wanted to make sure you heard that and you understood that what the data includes and does not include in terms of those industries.
Yes, I
those
understand.
Employers.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you for that comment though.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, do we have a motion regarding this request for additional data?
I motion to approve. Celeste.
Do we have a second?
I second, Kathy.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. And we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you. This is extension 2, UT Austin 082, impact study of public pre-kindergarten on primary, secondary, and post-secondary student outcomes. Do we have any comments or questions on this extension? It is an extension only, there's no change in data, and it's a 1-year extension, so it brings it, I believe, to the full 5 years that we normally allow. So any comments or questions here? If not, do we have a motion regarding this extension?
Greg Branch here. I move to approve.
Kathy, I
Do we
second.
have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that's the most in unison we've ever been. The motion passes. Great. We'll move on to the next one. Okay, and now we're moving into our proposals for new research. For those of you who are joining us for the first time as researchers or listening in, we ask our researchers to provide a brief overview of their project, and then we open it up to discussion just with the ERC advisory board members. So do we have the researcher here with us for this project? It's University of Houston 29, Towards Greater Accountability, a study of reading achievement among students with disabilities in elementary school.
Yes, I'm here on the call. My name's Sandra Alviar.
Hi, Sandra. Can we have a brief overview of your proposal, please?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Sandra Alviar. I'm the Research and Data Management Analyst at Region 4 Education Service Center. And I'd also like to mention that I'm joined by my colleague, Linda Dizelle Hall, who's the Coordinator of Systemic Services in the Department of Special Education Solutions. And we thank you for this opportunity to discuss our proposed project examining reading achievement among elementary school students with disabilities in Region 4 and statewide. Local education agencies in Texas have consistently struggled on state and federal accountability standards for reading achievement among students with disabilities. Region 4 and all ESCs are tasked with providing leadership, training, and technical assistance to support achievement among students with disabilities. To accomplish this, and also in the spirit of continuous improvement, frankly, we need more detailed data than we can currently access to help us understand where the greatest need for assistance is and to target the kinds of professional development and technical support that we offer to these districts and schools. To better inform our work, we propose using ERC data to answer the following questions. First, in recent years, has the proportion of students with disabilities who met reading performance standards significantly changed across primary disability type? This this particular question gives us a longitudinal perspective on achievement. To better grasp the sources of variation in students' reading achievement, we ask a second research question. What is the association between primary disability type and meeting passing standards in grade 5 reading? A pivot on that question is our final research question. What is the association between primary disability type and meeting content student expectations? These are TEKS-aligned objectives within the STAR assessment. We're seeking 1 year of access to ERC data to answer these research questions, and we thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments or questions on the part of advisory board members? And I apologize that I can't see you. I did have a couple of things. One is that at one point you talk about producing a research brief in winter 2021. I think you meant winter 2022.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is likely an oversight. Yes, yes.
Yeah, we're happy to make that change. And then the other piece is that 1 year for access to the ERC data, we find a lot of researchers, especially if they haven't used the data before, that can be a tight time frame. And projects are generally 2 years. Now, I don't know if this is an issue with UH in terms of the fee structure, but it's certainly something that we could consider as an advisory board to provide a longer period of time with the expectation that you will do it within a year, but have the additional time if you can work out arrangements with the ERC. Just as one reason I say that is because you talk about wanting data through 2021, and there really won't be data for 2021 ready to go by the time this project wraps up. There's a little bit of a lag in terms of, say, the end of the academic year for TEA or the fiscal year and the time we get the data. And I can let Nina jump in here if she agrees, Nina Taylor from TEA, if she agrees that that's going to be a tight time frame to get 2021 data. To have a year.
For the STAR data particularly.
Yeah, this would be STAR data, and they want their project to be finished up within a year.
That might be a bit tight.
That was my sense too.
Yeah.
Mine too.
This is Kathy. Yeah, I was going to jump in and say we're really comfortable, and Sandra, we can have an offline conversation, but we'd be really comfortable with moving forward with a two-year proposal, Sandra. We can talk about holding you harmless for that recommendation.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing up those points.
Oh, you're welcome. So if you folks are comfortable, I think I will propose that the motion include a 2-year window with the understanding that you'll work with the ERC at Houston regarding anything that you need to work out with that. But it sounds like Kathy is very flexible there, just to make sure you have enough time.
Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
Do we have any other? Oh, you're welcome. Any other comments or questions? If not, do we have a motion regarding this proposal, which will be for a 2-year period?
I motion to approve. This is Celeste.
Do we have a second?
Second, Gary.
All in favor? Say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes, and this is approved for a 2-year period from today. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it feels like a while since we've had a proposal that involved an ESC, so nice to have you with us. Okay, the next proposal is UH 30, exploring the changes and impacts of demographic representation on the Texas TEM teaching workforce. And I'm going to stop here just for a moment, because it's my understanding, Kathy, that these first 2 proposals are also for remote access. So we're going to talk about remote access for them when we get to your remote access proposals and make sure they're included. Is that, I believe that's what we discussed and how we plan to move forward. I'm seeing if Kathy is. Kathy, are you there?
I am. Are you able to hear me?
Now I can, yep.
Okay, super. Yes, I was just confirming your understanding is correct.
Okay, great. So just don't let me forget to cover them. I know there was a little confusion on how to put them on the agenda because most of your others are existing projects. So just make sure we don't miss these proposals when we get to the remote access. Okay, and the second one, oh, you're welcome. And the second one, of course, I just introduced is the changes and impacts of demographic representation of STEM. And do we have the researchers with us today to provide a brief overview on this project?
Yes, this is Jacob Kirksey.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, so
yes, can we
thank you.
Have a little information? We're nice
yeah.
to see you. Normally we get to see researchers.
Yeah, it's great. Welcome to 2020. Hi, so
really?
My name is Jacob Kirksey, and I'm joined by Dr. Jessica Gottlieb. We are both assistant professors in the Educational Leadership Policy Program in Texas Tech College of Education. I want to start by thanking the advisory board for the time you've already spent reading our proposal. As a brief overview, the general intent of this project is to better understand STEM and STEM educator trajectories for underrepresented populations in Texas, a topic of which my colleagues and I share a great passion and expertise, and it's a topic policymakers in the state have dedicated substantial time and resources to address. For instance, this year, TEA identified 5 teacher critical shortage areas, and 3 of the 5 areas deal directly with STEM or STEM adjacent. Increasing the diversity of the STEM teaching workforce has the potential to combat chronic teacher shortages, and research suggests that this diversity could also link to shaping academic outcomes for students in STEM, including whether or not they decide to become STEM educators themselves. To that end, our first research question asks, what are the demographic characteristics of the STEM teaching workforce in Texas? This aspect of the project is critical to understanding who is currently teaching in Texas public schools, both in terms of race and ethnicity, but also characteristics such as whether they received special education services or were a non-native English speaker when they were in school. The second research question asks, what factors correspond to the turnover of underrepresented STEM teachers? This part of the project would yield significant implications for the state policymakers, as many of these potential characteristics, such as financial compensation, are already tied to several current state policy initiatives. Finally, our last research question focuses on the outcomes for students, with a particular focus on whether demographic representation, or in other words, having teachers who are like themselves, is linked to outcomes for students. This burgeoning area of research has documented the effects of demographic matching, and it's exciting. But it also raises important questions about both the extent to which we can trace demographic representation to more distal outcomes, such as in higher ed or the workforce, but also whether there might be more nuance to the literature that is entirely focused on having student-teacher similarities in terms of race and ethnicity and gender. We plan to investigate additional similarities as students and teachers may share other lived experiences, such as having a disability or being an immigrant. We're excited to hear your feedback and answer your questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the advisory board?
This is Nina. I wanted to mention that the teacher class assigned view is going away in 1920. So we will be providing a different view called class roster. And it's actually going to be easier to use than the teacher class assign. So just be on the lookout for that, and we'll provide that for 1920 as well as the documentation. And just let us know if you have any questions about it.
Great, thank you. That's exciting.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Celeste. I was just curious about the dating back to 1994, given that the teacher-student link is 2012.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So we're requesting back to 94 so that we can get as many characteristics of the educators as possible. So that type of matching analysis would, as you indicate, occur in the 2012-2018 years. But then to get some of the characteristics of those teachers, we'd like to use the PEIMS database dating back to 94 for those teachers who attended Texas public schools and Texas public institutions following that. And so that's why the data request goes back there. Our sort of core analysis, as you indicated, is that 2012 to 2018 window.
Okay, thank you.
And I also noticed that you asked for the faculty data in higher ed. So I assume you're using that, and I think you said you were using it for a control. So it makes a little more sense to me now. I did want to add that in terms of graduates with teaching degrees, you're not going to find those. It's only since last year, recent legislation, that we actually be tracking education degrees. In the past, we've tracked based on the major. A student couldn't major in education; they would major in the content area and then do the education courses. But you are asking for SBEC data, so hopefully that will provide everything that you need to identify at least current teachers or past teachers. You might have more of a struggle identifying someone who was pursuing being a teacher and then didn't go in that direction.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
And you can't always go in and jump in and find if someone took a lot of education courses and try to use that as a proxy. And we have had researchers do that. I'm kind of excited that moving forward, we are actually collecting again education degrees, and we will have that information. Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, do we have a motion regarding this proposal?
Greg Branch, I move to approve.
I'll second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? If not, motion passes. Congratulations. Good luck with your research. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we're going to move on to the next proposal. This is proposal 3. And this one includes the remote access request. So aside from those first 2 UH proposals that we'll tackle when we get to the other UH remote access, and of course those will be contingent on approval of UH to offer remote access. All of the proposals we're going to see from UT Austin and UT Dallas today it will indicate if it includes remote access, and we did provide the advisory board with the remote access documentation that was filled out for those projects, as well as the regular proposal documentation. So the first one is UT 146, can affirmative action reduce socioeconomic inequality? Do we have a researcher with us for this proposal?
Yes, hi, this is Natalie Bao. So shall I launch into the description?
Yes, please do. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for taking the time to read our proposal. So I'm Natalie Bao. I'm an assistant professor of economics at UCLA, and I'm also joined here by Jean-William Lebotte, who's an assistant professor at the University of Calgary. And the proposed research is essentially a new follow-up project to a previous project that we completed at the ERC in Austin, studying the effects of the reinstatement of racial affirmative action policies in Texas public universities following the ruling in Grutter versus Bollinger in 2004. And in that previous project, we looked at the effects of these policies on students' human capital before they went to college. So we saw how they might have incentivized underrepresented minority students to increase their human capital. And based on that kind of work, we are now interested in looking at the effects of these policies after students actually get to college. And so we want to use the same natural experiment created by the Supreme Court ruling to look at what happens to underrepresented minorities' college graduation, choice of major, and other long-term socioeconomic outcomes like wages.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from advisory board members?
Yes, hi, this is Angie. I have a question about how you're going to define the students who benefited from an affirmative action policy. Mm-hmm. So you said you were going to use their date of birth and then approximate their year of high school graduation and whether affirmative action policies were in place at the time they applied for a college. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if that's going to be a little too broad, if that could catch up minority students who didn't need the affirmative action policy for admission. They already met admission standards on their own. Mm-hmm. I did see that you were going to use, or that you were collecting SAT score information. I wonder if you were going to use that to maybe weed out some of the group who would have been in your larger group, but wouldn't actually have needed those policies.
Yeah, that's a great question, Angie. So I think we think about this in 2 ways. one way is like we think about this as kind of the intention to treat of the policy. So we're going to think about sort of on average, what was the effect of being an underrepresented minority student when this policy was in place versus when it wasn't in place. And so that's certainly going to catch students who didn't, actually would have, for example, been admitted to University of Austin without the policy. But it's going to kind of say on average what happens to students in these demographic groups under this policy versus when the policy is not in place. And that's sort of the first thing you mentioned, where we're going to use data of both to get at that. I think the second thing you're mentioning is exactly what we want to do, is then think about kind of the distribution of the effects of the policy. And so, of course, for some students, as you're saying, we expect might potentially benefit more from the policy because they may have been more marginal for admissions. And so there we can use the SAT data or even other Texas test score data to kind of get at where those students were in the distribution and see who in the distribution seems to kind of benefit from the policy.
Need to mute. There's a lot of background noise. Julie's calling in again, so we should have her back on audio soon.
Is now joining.
Everyone.
Julie.
Okay.
Yeah, can hear you now.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry about that. I just dropped the call. I actually made a note of the password, so it'll be a lot faster if that happens to me again. Someone else, I think, was probably trying to get in, and it caused a problem. Thanks. Thanks for the question, Angie. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on UT Austin 146? And what we're going to do is we're going to take, well, first, any other questions on the overall proposal, not the remote aspect? If not, I want to move to comments on the remote, and that's what I'll do for each item. We'll quickly do comments on the overall, then comments on the remote, and then we'll go ahead and ask for a motion for both in the interest of time. But if there is a sense that there's some concern about one of the other, please bring it up so we can separate out the vote. But I did want to say we are, one of the researchers for this project is in Canada, and that researcher won't have access to the data. This advisory board did make that determination in our guidelines that it can only be accessed, the data can only be accessed by researchers who are in the United States. And you will see we actually have a little more detail on that policy coming up towards the end of the meeting, because we did have advisory board members ask for a little more detail there. So just wanted to mention that we will be talking about that later, but I believe that researchers understand on this that it's just for U.S. access. Any other comments on the remote access part of this proposal? If not, then do we have a motion regarding this proposal and allowance of remote access for the researchers?
This is Kathy. I move to approve the proposal, including remote access.
Greg Branch here. I second on both.
Great. Any all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, I think I heard 7. So the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we appreciated having you. And the motion passes for remote access and approval. Okay,
Thanks so
moving on
much.
to the next.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Yes, thank you. Our next proposal is 4, remote access request UT Austin 147, the effect of Grad Plus loans on graduate school outcomes, earnings, and programs. And again, this is a new consideration of a new approval and consideration of remote access. Do we have the researchers with us?
Yeah, this is Jeff Denning. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jeff. How are you? We can hear you well. Can we have a brief overview of your project, please?
Sure thing. So this is joint with Sandy Black and Leslie Turner, and we're requesting remote access for 3 years. We are interested in the effect of the Graduate Plus or Grad Plus loans program on graduate school outcomes. This was a loans program implemented by the federal government starting in 2006, and it was a big expansion of the amount that students could borrow for graduate school. And so we're interested in the effect of this expansion of access to student loans on several things. One is the effect of this on students who are enrolled in graduate programs at the time that this policy was enacted. We're interested to see if this affected their completion and subsequent earnings as a result of having access to additional loans. We're also interested, a key concern, and one of the reasons this policy was implemented is to make sure that graduate programs were able to be accessed by students from backgrounds that perhaps had less means. And so we're interested to see if this changed the distribution of students attending high cost and or high return graduate programs after the policy was implemented. And then the final line of inquiry we're interested in is, did this change the way that graduate programs price their tuition, their programs, et cetera? So this is whenever there's an increase in grant or loan aid, there's a potential concern that might change the prices. And so that schools might change the prices in response to this. And so we're interested in exploring that and contrasting it with a similar policy for undergraduates. So those are the high-level questions that we're interested in, and now I'll stop and answer any questions people have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments on the part of advisory board members? Okay, I had one small thing, just because I like things to align. In one place, you said you were looking for funding from Spencer, and another place it was from Arnold Foundation.
Oh, sorry, that's embarrassing. Yeah,
that's okay. I just wondered what the story was there.
That was a failure to, we sought and actually received funding from Arnold Ventures, so it's just Arnold.
Okay, so you're all set then. You probably wrote it at a time when you weren't sure. The other thing I wanted to say, because I know we're going to see an earlier project come up for, I think it's all 3 of you again, for remote access, something you're wrapping up. Please be sure that we get the research brief for that earlier one as you're moving forward with this one. I know it's not wrapped up yet, but just wanted to put in that plug. And any other questions?
I had one other question. Jeff, I noticed, I was reading through this again, and did you all want to track students outside of Texas that you would need the National Student Clearinghouse data? There was some sentence in there that made me think that.
I don't think so. I mean, because we're going to be looking, we won't know. We will only be really looking at students in Texas because we need kind of lots of information about the types of students we're attending. And I think the National Student Clearinghouse, I'd have to think about it more, but I think the coverage outside would not be suitable for looking at.
Okay. So. Just wanted to make sure you didn't just forget that or something. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Celeste. Appreciate you bringing that up. And I will mention for those researchers listening in who have requested National Student Clearinghouse, we have received access now, but we're having some technical difficulties in terms of some of the data that's coming to the coordinating board. So the updated data hasn't been provided yet, but we are in process of trying to iron out the technical difficulties. And I see emails every day related to it, so I assume we're getting closer. So thanks to everyone for their patience as we try to get that access up and running for all of you. Okay, and I don't know, with Nina there, Nina, are you able to give any kind of update on the high school to college piece for that? Or is that just going to be kind of...
Yes, we recently completed the work on the NSC data for the 16-17 graduates and the 17-18 graduates. And then we will be working on the next year of graduates, hopefully January.
Great. So that means 16, 17, and 17, 18 will be coming to us to prepare for the ERCs shortly?
Yes, I believe they're already there.
Oh, wonderful. Great. I hadn't heard that. So that's working remotely. You don't sometimes you don't get a date. So that's great to know. And I'm sure the folks, the researchers who use that data are happy to hear that as well. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, then let's move to our any other questions or comments?
Yes, this is Angie. I almost forgot Adam had a note about this one asking if the ERC data contained unemployment records by county. He didn't think we had that, and I know that was one of the data elements requested.
Yes, it does not, is my understanding. Unless you're aware of something, Jeff, that you've seen that we are forgetting, but it's my understanding it's just quarterly wages and then the industry information.
That's fine. We may, that's publicly available by county, and so I think we should be, if we need to add it, we should it, so.
Okay, great. Yeah, then that makes that easy. Good question. Thanks, Angie. All right, any other questions? If not, do we have a motion regarding this proposal for both approval and remote access?
Greg Branch, I move to approve both the proposal and the remote access request.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I just wanted to verify that's for 3 years.
Oh, yes, thank you for verifying. I did hear Jeff say that because I had a note that the project period was not clear. So thank you. So this is for 3 years. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, project approved. I'm sorry. I guess everyone said aye, so we had no nays. So project approved. Nice to see you, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise, thanks.
Congratulations. And then our next project is proposal 6, and this also is for remote access as well as initial approval. It's UT Dallas 138, the efficacy of accelerated developmental education reforms in Texas. Do we have researchers with us today for this project?
Julie, did we skip proposal 5, the 148?
Oh, we did. Well, I think it just jumped ahead. Let's go back to 5 then. Let's stay in order. Thank you so much, Greg. Must have jumped ahead too. Okay. This is proposal 5, UT Austin 148, industry-based certifications and students post-secondary education and employment outcomes. And this is Matt Gianni. Matt, are you with us today?
I am. I'd like to say I thought that was the fastest I've ever been approved for an ERC proposal. So I thought we just whizzed right by. I was like, that was great. But I think I should talk a little bit about the study first. Yeah, can y'all hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, yeah, thank you all for considering this proposal. As I'm sure many of you are aware, industry-based certifications, sometimes called industry-recognized credentials or various other names, have really grown in importance in state policy in Texas over the past few years. Students can earn performance acknowledgements on their high school diploma for receiving industry-based certifications. And now they're part of the Texas accountability system, part of the college, career, and military readiness indicators. If students earn one of these certifications that is on the approved list created by the Texas Education Agency. So also this data just started being collected, from my understanding, in about 2017 for high school graduates, and has been collected over the past few years. But to my knowledge, there hasn't yet been a really systematic investigation of the factors that predict students' receipt of industry-based certifications, nor the relationship between students' receipt of those certifications and their subsequent post-secondary education and employment outcomes. So that's really the focus of this study, is both to see what student and school and regional factors predict whether students will receive these credentials, and then the relationship between these credentials and students' short-term employment and post-secondary education outcomes. I should just say that this is definitely an exploratory study. I think I'll need to get into the data and just see
Is
things
now
like.
exiting.
Oh, did Julie leave? She didn't want to hear anymore. Oh, are you back? Hello, Julie.
It logged me off.
No worries. Yeah, I was just saying one final point, which is that I think there's somewhere between 80 and 100 of these certifications on the approved list. The list changes every year, and not every year, but it changes, has changed from year to year as TEA refines the list of approved credentials. And my understanding, kind of anecdotally, is that the quality of the data is improving as schools and districts are gaining more experience in collecting data. So I'll need to do a bit of exploration in terms of, can I look at individual certifications? Or do I need to combine multiple certifications into groups and kind of look at the groups? So there will need to be some exploration there, but hopefully I can make some decisions there in short order and then get to the analyses of students' subsequent outcomes. So anyway, that's a high-level overview, and I'll pause now for questions.
Thank you, Matt, and
Sure.
Apologies, my phone seems to be logging me out at regular intervals. So yes, please do keep going if it does that again, and at least I was able to call in quickly this time. Do we have any questions or comments from advisory board members?
This is Nina. Matt, I wanted to let you know that the IBC data is being moved out of PDOT Graduate into a new view called Student Post-Secondary Certification License. So we'll be providing new views with the data, and so you'll be wanting to use that. So again, we'll provide that for this year and for 1920 and documentation to go along with it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nina.
You're welcome.
And I'm sorry, can I just mention one other thing, which is that at the time I was creating the proposal, my understanding was that the most recent National Student Clearinghouse data available was for 2016 high school graduates. And I think I did not know that there was going to be more recent NSC data that was soon to be available. So I didn't specifically request NSC data because I'm looking at cohorts of high school graduates starting in 2017 and over the next few years. So I actually would love to have the NSC data as well. I think that's particularly important for students in the comparison condition who don't earn industry-based certifications, who might be more likely to go to college out of state compared to students who earn industry-based certifications. That's just a hypothesis that I'd need to test. But I do think there could be greater bias in the estimates of the relationship between industry-based certifications and college going if I don't include the out-of-state college enrollment, particularly for the comparison condition. So I didn't request that, but if it's possible to receive the NSC data, I would love to receive that as well.
We can certainly put that before the advisory board. We've done this sort of thing frequently in the past, if it makes sense to us in terms of the project, and I think you've certainly justified it. So we can add that into a motion if everyone's okay. I actually did have a quick question. In terms of the certifications, and I know you're using the TEA data, is there a way to link them up to the zip codes that higher ed uses, those classifications of instructional programs, Matt? Are you aware of a way to do that? Or if they come in the TEA data? That's a great question, and I'm not aware. I feel like someone else was about to chime in. Is that correct, or did I mishear? Could be. If not, my understanding is that, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, that you can link the industry certifications with CTE clusters, and there is a crosswalk from my understanding between the CTE clusters and at least like the 2-digit zip codes. So I think it's possible, but
but I'm not 100% sure, and that's another thing that I'll need to explore a bit. If there's what are the easiest ways to look at, is there alignment between the field in which a student receives an industry-based certification, and if students go to college, the field that they study once they get there? So that's something that's on my radar, but I need to do a little more investigation to figure out the best way to do that.
Great. Yeah, I think we'd be interested in that. The other thing I wanted to suggest, and I don't have your proposal up because I don't have as many screens as normal, but for you're requesting for the higher ed data, you're going to be looking at if there are certificates for those same students where you find certifications. Is that correct? To see if they went on or were involved in some way, maybe in high school, for seeking a certificate, or are you just looking at certifications?
Certificate attainment will be one of the things I look at in terms of students' kind of short-term educational outcomes. I wouldn't be able to look at something like baccalaureate attainment, but I could look at things like certificate attainment, associate's degree attainment. Correct.
Yeah, great.
Correct.
No, I think that would be really interesting to see the tie. And the other thing I wanted to add is, if you didn't ask, did you ask for the CBM OOM, which has those very short-term occupational skills awards on it? It might be worth it to see if anyone, was doing some of those groupings as well as pursuing a certification.
That's a great point, and I did not specifically request the CBM OOM. So if it would be possible to add that, that would be wonderful. I would love to look into that data as well.
Okay. Any other, and we can raise that again when we get to a motion. Are there any other comments or questions for Matt on his proposal? All right, any comments or questions in terms of the remote access piece for that? And I apologize, I think when we went back to the early, I think we've covered remote access and all of the approvals. So do we have a motion then, if there's nothing else, regarding approval of the project with the addition of the National Student Clearinghouse data up to most recent date available, and the CBM OOM data up to most recent date available, and also regarding approval of remote access? And that was a mouthful, but see if anyone wants to jump in with a motion.
This is Kathy. I move to approve the proposed project and remote access, and including the additional data of NSC and CBM OOM.
This is Celeste. I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Nice job, by the way, Kathy. All right, well, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, Matt. The project is approved.
Thank you all so much.
You're welcome. And now I guess we're moving on to the UT Dallas projects. And so the first one for remote access and approval is the Efficacy of Accelerated Developmental Education Reforms in Texas. And I'm going to see, do we have Trey Miller with us or one of the other researchers today to give us
Hi,
a
Julie.
brief overview?
Yes, I'm here.
Trey.
This is, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
So it's good to see everybody. My name is Trey Miller, and I'm now an associate professor in the economics program at the University of Texas at Dallas. And I'm excited to share our proposal with you. This is really a proposal to continue some ongoing collaborative research with the coordinating board that's been going on for a number of years now, funded by IES and various grants. So this, these projects got initiated back in 2013 around the passage of some significant reforms to the Texas Success Initiative that gives policy around developmental education in the state. So we, at the time, we worked with the coordinating board. This was when I was at RAND at the time. So I worked with the coordinating board to develop an IES-funded researcher practitioner partnership to help develop a research agenda to inform the direction of TSI reforms and reforms to developmental education in the state. And these are 3 projects that came out of that IES-funded researcher practitioner partnership. So the first is a randomized controlled trial evaluation of co-requisite remediation. So co-requisites are, as probably most of you know, one of the primary directions that the state took in terms of reforming developmental education, and nationally is one of the primary areas for reform in that area. So this places students directly into a college level course with support, as opposed to having them take a sequence of developmental education courses. And so we worked with the coordinating board to get a randomized controlled trial evaluation off the ground. And we randomly assigned 1,432 students from 4 cohorts at 5 colleges across the state, beginning in fall 2016, to either co-requisite treatment condition or the highest level standalone developmental education course. And this was focused on English, so it was an English co-requisite versus the highest level integrated reading and writing developmental course. So we are just continuing this analysis and the work that was funded under the IES grant. But now that I'm at UT Dallas, it's
Is Trey frozen on everyone's?
I think Trey must be frozen. Can you hear me, Linda?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Trey looks like he's having internet issues at the moment.
Okay. You know what? I'm happy to sort of continue that because I am aware of this work, and I think the folks on the advisory board have read the proposal. But this is basically work that that was happening at the coordinating board through an IES grant, and it's for the most part wrapped up. But there was I think there's some grant funding left, and Trey had moved up to UT Dallas, and there were a couple of follow-up sort of research questions that seem to tie in. And so this project is just to do that final bit of research on this work that had been ongoing, those follow-up projects that made sense in terms of the foundation that had already been laid for the project. So I think, are there any questions or comments that I might be able to answer based on what I know while we try to get Trey back on board? Or it could be other researchers on the project or on the call. I'm not sure. I'm guessing maybe not. And it looks like it says people are waiting.
Yeah, I'm readmitting Trey, Julie.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay. Hey, Trey. Trey, are you back in?
Yeah, sorry about that. I think my internet went out for a moment. I apologize.
Yeah, I just gave people a little bit of more of an overview, just so we can keep moving forward. Just that you're kind of wrapping up that final big research project, and there were a couple of other questions that it kind of generated that are coming through. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, and we'll move on to questions and comments if not.
Sure. Just the other things. So one is, one of the questions that has come up through the research on co-requisites is the extent to which the effectiveness of co-requisites that we've seen in our research and other research is due to the student receiving support or the developmental support, the co-requisite support, or whether it is due to just being accelerated and placed into that college level course. So there's a strand of research that IES has said that, asked us to look into with some remaining grant funds to do a regression discontinuity analysis with more recent cohorts under House Bill 2223, where the majority of students are now initially placed into a co-requisite, and if they test below college level on the TSIA, so we can look at students just above and below the cut score there. And then one other small piece is just we recently submitted a journal article on some analyses evaluating the efficacy and integrating reading and writing curricula within the developmental education sequence. This is another one of the reforms that the state initiated earlier, and so we may be asked to do some, analyses from reviewers through the journal review process. So I wanted to have that data in case that happens. But anyway, that's just an overview. I appreciate any feedback or thoughts.
Yeah, any comments or questions from the advisory board? Okay, anything related to remote access? I will be sure that if there's any briefs owed from prior work, and I noticed that Paco's working with you on that, let's make sure that those are in. I did want to mention that related to the remote access piece. All right.
Julie, Paco
yes,
has had previous remote access requests through, and he is current on briefs.
He's current, great. Yeah, I just wanted to be sure because I know he's had several projects. That's great. Thanks, Greg. All right. Well, if we don't have any additional comments or questions, do we have a motion regarding this project?
I motion to approve this project. This is Celeste.
Is that with remote access?
With remote access.
Do we have a second?
This is Kathy. I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. I'm trying to count as we go through. Any opposed? If not, then motion passes. Thanks so much for joining us, Trey. Good luck with the project.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, moving on to the next item, and this is Proposal 8, including remote access. This is UT Dallas 140, Promise Neighborhoods, Disinvestment and Academic Outcomes. Do we have a researcher with us for this project?
Yes, hello. Thanks for having me today.
And you know what? And hold on one moment. Did I skip one? It looks like, Greg, did I skip a project here? I think I may have. I think it's fine. We'll take Proposal 8 and then we'll move on we'll go back to 7. Okay, can you please, sorry about that, provide an overview of your project?
Sure, thanks for having me. So unequal student educational outcomes are a problematic feature of our schooling system, and theoretical and empirical research points to the salience of both school and non-school factors in the production and persistence of these achievement gaps. The Promise Neighborhoods program, the program that I'm focusing on in this proposal, is a new iteration of federal education intervention and a place-based program that focuses on schools and their surrounding ecosystems. It aims to improve children's outcomes from birth to when they join the labor market, or from cradle to career. My research aims to identify if place-based education programs like Promise Neighborhoods can reduce inequality, reduce barriers to opportunity, and eliminate high-risk factors that negatively impact student learning and educational attainment. Using student-level data pre- and post-implementation of Promise Neighborhood programs in a quasi-experimental design, my main research goals are to determine the characteristics predictive of Promise Neighborhood grant acquisition and to examine the association between Promise Neighborhood funding and support on academic achievement and other non-academic student outcomes in the short and medium term. While this is a national program, promised neighborhoods are authorized by the Every Student Succeeds Act, the state of Texas has received a large amount of federal funds, priming the state as an interesting case study. Texas also has a number of the nation's largest school districts, and discerning the implications of place-based education programs that target low-performing schools and disadvantaged neighborhoods, as opposed to universal programs that are district-wide, could be particularly powerful in this context. I look forward to your questions and comments, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments on the part of the advisory board?
Yes, hi, this is Angie. Since
Yes.
you are using wage data, again, like for an earlier proposal, I just wanted to make sure you're aware that TWC's wage data does not have geographic information.
Yes.
So it should be fine if you're trying to match specific people like students, but if you were trying to look at just a general neighborhood, that may be not possible through our data.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking about students who are treated and untreated by this program. So yes, thank you.
That should be fine. And then just one other thing, it just wasn't clear in the proposal. You have a few different groups broken out. You have students in a group a neighborhood who never applied for the promised funding, and you're going to compare that to other groups. I was wondering if you were going to group the other neighborhoods together, the successfully received the funding, submitted an application but did not receive funding, submitted an intent but then did not complete the application. If you're going to put those three groups together and compare them to the students in the neighborhoods who never applied, or if you were going to break them all out individually.
Yes, great question. I think this program and the promise of this student level data enables me to make several comparison groups. And I think that will enable me to build a really robust estimation strategy to look at effects. So like you mentioned, I'll be able to compare students, treated students in successful promised neighborhoods to their counterparts in places that applied but were rejected, or that applied and were really close. They met a threshold, but then were ultimately rejected. But also looking at distressed neighborhoods, low-performing schools who were not part of this proposal process, but maybe could have been eligible, to see what comparable groups or even geographically proximate schools, students in those schools look like. So there are lots of potential comparison groups to really build a robust estimation strategy.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks, Angie. I'm actually going to try. Did you all lose the visual for our PowerPoint? Or is it just me? Are you able to see the PowerPoint, everyone? Okay,
yes.
Great. Yeah, I think I just had it. Okay, there, now I can see it again. All right, do we have any other questions or comments for Angie? I did quickly have something logistical. Angie, normally we don't approve projects for partial periods, and so you asked for it through January of 2023. Normally it would be 2 months through from today's date, so it would be December 10th, 2022. Is that okay with you?
Yes, and I think that was just an error on my part. I don't think I knew when I submitted my application to the UTD ERC, I didn't know when the advisory board meeting was scheduled.
Oh, okay.
So, yes,
that's perfect. Sense. I just wanted to make sure you understood. It'll be for 2 years from today. That's great. And I also, you've got supplemental data. None of that supplemental data is confidential or FERPA issues. So that's something I believe Greg can put directly into the ERC. Is that correct? And that we won't have to bring it in through the coordinating board and de-identify any individuals. Is that correct, Greg? For that supplemental data?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, any questions about the remote access piece? If not, do we have a motion regarding this proposal for a new project and for remote access for the project?
This is Celeste. I move that we approve the project for remote access as well as just the project.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, Gary.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Congratulations. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And now I'm going, oh, you're welcome. And now I'm going to move backwards and we're going to go to proposal 7. My apologies, it moved quickly through the slides. This is remote access and new proposal request for the predictive power of value add on economic outcomes. And this is, folks, I see Lori Taylor's name. Do we have a researcher with us, Lori, or someone else working on this, someone from UTD?
Yes, this is Court Darren. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Oh, I can hear you and see you now. Thanks for joining us. Can we have a brief overview of your project, please?
Yes, so you saw Lori Taylor's name, who we've worked with before, Dan O'Brien and myself, who are both faculty members in the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences at UTD. We have all had experience using ERC data with constructing value-added measures for campuses and districts in Texas. And this proposed research really extends this in new ways. Currently, our work appears on the Texas Smart Schools website at Texas A&M. Texas uses a testing program for assessing student learning based on state-mandated curriculum, and value-added measures, often based on these tests but constructed in different ways, are also used to assess student achievement. The focus of this project is to investigate whether state-mandated tests provide, in value-added form, useful measures of school effectiveness over and above existing measures. We will investigate whether value-added and other test score-based measures of school effectiveness are strongly related to student academic achievement. We'll try and identify indicators associated with the most effective campus value-added measures, and we're going to provide ongoing campus and district value-added scores to the Texas Smart Schools website, which provides Texas campuses and school districts with information to help achieve high academic outcomes at the lowest cost. So I'm going to stop there. Dan O'Brien is also on this call. So thank you, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the advisory board members? I did have one quick thing. As we're starting to see projects that look a little different than traditional projects, we're asking additional questions about how the data are being used. And I know you've got something that I don't know if it's correct to characterize it as a dashboard, but could you speak a little bit more to the data that you're actually putting out publicly? Is it just that value-added score? Is it some kind of interactive website, or is it just a listing of those scores by area? It would just be helpful to know a little more about what that application or product, so to speak, what uses the ERC data for that.
Sure, and this is a historic project that the Texas legislature actually mandated of the comptroller a number of years back, where they wanted basically every campus and school district in Texas to be evaluated in terms of high academic achievement and low cost. Mm-hmm. They wanted to rank schools so that basically schools could learn and there could be some transfer of technology between schools based on these findings. So that's where this project began. We constructed here at UTD the value-added measures for academic achievement and worked with the comptroller, and that's now shifted over just to Texas A&M with Lori Taylor to create basically 3-year averages. So obviously it's all FERPA compliant, and a dashboard is set up that school superintendents, along with any citizen in Texas or beyond, can go and see how their campus or school district is ranked in terms of cost savings as well as academic achievement.
Thank you. And so specifically, it's the value-added score that uses the ERC data that's used in that dashboard, plus other information that comes from other sources about funding and those types of things. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
Great. Thank you. All right.
I had a quick question. Are you planning to link teachers and students
we do have, we are using or asking for teacher data to link for coming up with some information about campus variables, for example, turnover and mobility among teachers as well as students, and looking for some background information on teachers as well to help inform some of our regressions. That is in the proposal.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was confused. I couldn't quite tell if you needed to link the students to the actual teacher that's teaching their course.
Yes, and in fact, I'm going to see if Dan, who is our data guru, okay, you may hear, yes, we are.
Okay.
All right, no, yes.
Okay, well, one, I just wanted to remind you that it doesn't start till 2012. And so the 2003 to 12, you won't have any of that linkage. And you also need to request another file. You need the teacher class assigned file.
Teacher class assigned file. Okay.
And I'm assuming when you refer to class enroll, that's the P student class enroll, because you would need both of those plus you have the course complete, I believe, there too.
Right, we've got the class enroll.
Yeah. So you have to have the P class enroll, P teacher class assign, and the P course section, and of course the course complete would.
Yeah, it's clear that the student class enroll is what's intended there because he's also requesting enrollment separately.
Right, that's what I figured.
He is, and thank you very much, Celeste, for pointing this out. If they are interested in linking, it sounds I had missed that they were interested in linking teachers and students, and they will need the class assigned file as well. So if it's possible to add that request, that would be much appreciated.
Yes, I appreciate your pointing that out. These are some new data which we were not using before, so that's very useful to know. So yes, if that could be added in, we'd appreciate it.
Great. Yeah, we can certainly include that. So basically, this is coming back to us with kind of a refresh related to the work you've done before, but with a little bit of an expansion on some of your research topics. That characterize that correctly?
Well, we really are looking in a couple of different directions, particularly the predictive nature of trying to compare some of the other types of tests with the value-added measure. But I mean, clearly it's using some of the older stuff as well.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Julie, is not. Oh, sorry. Is this this is Linda? Is this a 3-year? This is a 3-year request?
Yes.
That's what I have.
Okay.
Linda Hargrove, does that sound correct? A 3-year request?
Yes, that's what I saw as well.
Okay, thanks.
And thanks for joining us, Linda.
Yep, thank you.
Happy to have you here.
Yep.
Nina represented you well.
Oh, good.
Yes, she had some good questions and some good information about how your files are being redone. Some of the TEA files. Okay, anything else? Linda, did you have anything else?
No.
Anyone else? Okay, if not, do we have a motion regarding approval of this project, including the additional data source noted, as well as approval for remote access?
This is Celeste.
Any other?
Yeah,
okay.
I will. For approval and for the added. What did we say? The added data, the file. Anyhow,
right.
Added file.
That works. Yeah. And actually, you know what would be very helpful is why don't we do it for approval contingent upon resubmission of the project with the correct data file added, and that way we'll have it in the proposal officially. I'm not, or at least to some kind of email indicating, because I'm not sure I got that completely right in my notes. So just for our benefit for the approval letter. Okay, so we have a motion to approve with the additional data added, with the additional condition. Celeste, if you're okay with adding that to the motion, that the project just be resubmitted with that extra file included. And also the motion includes approval for remote access.
Yes.
Do we have a second? Great, thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Kathy, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
For the
Okay, and Greg, the motion passes, and Greg, I'll also, please be sure for this project that we've got our briefs, the briefs are up to date. I assume they are. I don't have the remote access in front of me, again, since it's a continuing project.
They are. These researchers were approved for remote access to the existing project that they had that was coming to an end as remote access was approved. So they were cleared for briefs. For the benefit of the record, the additional data that was requested is teacher class assign from the beginning, which I believe is fiscal 11 through present.
Sign FY 11 through present. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, if you could just send the proposal, since that's the motion that passed from the board, just send along the proposal again with that added, and we'll be good to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for joining us. Congratulations. And now, of course, we've covered 8, so we're on to our last initial proposal, and that is Proposal 9, UT Dallas 141, measuring the cascade effect of the top 10% rule. And do we have researchers with us today to give us a brief overview of this project?
Hi, this is Andy Choi. I'm here with my co-authors, Vincent Park and Yen Lin.
Yes.
Right, so
we can see you and hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So our goal is to conduct a cost-benefit analysis of the top 10% rule in Texas. So under TTP, the top 10% rule, starting in 1998, any Texas high school student in the top 10% of their class was guaranteed admission to UT Austin. So this allowed UT Austin to admit students who may not have exceptional SAT scores, but performed well relative to their peers, and they were typically from disadvantaged high schools. On the other hand, TTP crowds out students who have high enough SAT scores that they could have been admitted without TTP, but were not in the top 10% of their class, so do not benefit from TTP, and whose SAT scores are not so high that they can still be admitted after TTP. And our conjecture is that these students are not the only students who are crowded out, because these students who are pushed out from UT Austin are likely to go to their next preferred universities and push out a new group of students who will then go to their next preferred universities, and so on. So in other words, we conjecture that there will be a cascade effect across many different universities, and this cascade effect is what we plan to study. So first, we will group students according to how their college enrollment is affected by TTP. And then we'll use the difference in differences approach to estimate for each group how TTP affects their outcomes. And by outcomes, I mean both educational outcomes and labor outcomes. And finally, we will perform a welfare analysis to estimate the overall impact of TTP on efficiency. Is there a question?
Yes, any questions or comments from the advisory board? I actually had one thing I wanted to ask because, and this is something actually Linda Hargrove, who supports the ERC through the coordinating board, was noticing as well when she was looking at the proposal. You seem to be focusing, in some places, it seems to be focused just on the UT system schools and the cascade there. But one thing we've observed when we look at students in terms of top 10% is you do get students choosing other, for example, flagships. So someone who does not go to UT Austin might go to Texas A&M. And then we see some of our other emerging research universities, again, that aren't in the UT system, where we will see students then sometimes choosing those institutions if they aren't in the top 10% and therefore might be, again, not included at flagships. So as you were writing about your cascade, I just wanted to know if you could talk a little more about if you've thought about sort of the natural patterns of where students might go, and also explain, because we might have misunderstood how you're planning to look at UT system schools versus looking at all the universities in the state.
Oh yeah, so we'd love to look at all the universities in Texas if possible. So if the data has all the application for all university in Texas, we'd love to look at that, definitely. And one thing we, because we didn't have student level data yet, we were not able to see what universities the students are pushed away from flagship university are substituting into. But one thing we could do was when we look at the proxy of the university quality using iPad data, which is a public data about the university, we could say that there is a clear hierarchy across different schools, even within Texas. So we'd love to include all this type of universities from that have different qualities in Texas.
Thank you. Yeah, that appeared to be the case in some places, but then it looked otherwise. There was something about UC system schools. So no, that's very helpful. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
This is Kathy. I would just add, Julie, to your comment, a reinforcement of the importance of considering things like the emerging research universities that are articulated by the state as an important consideration. And I appreciate the usage of iPads to identify a selectivity index or how a different mechanism for treating selectivity of institutions. I would also encourage, as Julie points out, the state's mechanisms for identifying designated flagships and then designated emerging research institutions or emerging flagships, because that may help in at least understanding patterns, if not predicting them.
Thank you, Kathy. And of course, coming from UH, which is one of our premier emerging research institutions, and obviously we do see those types of patterns to our emerging research institutions. One thing I noted that you had cited some prior research in Texas that didn't see the same patterns about cascading, and that could be in part because of the type of patterns you see. They might look a little bit different than other states. So I think understanding those sort of first-tier institutions in Texas and what that movement looks like, and maybe looking at that regionally as well could be really helpful in trying to tease out why research in Texas was showing different outcomes than some of the national research. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question about how you're going to use the K-12 data that you're requesting.
So first of all, we want to identify students who would have been in the top 10% of each high school. So knowing about their test score back in high school would be really important for us. Did I understand your question right?
Yeah, I think so. I just wasn't sure. For instance, you're requesting all the course completed data, but also the teacher-student link. But then again, that doesn't start till 2012. So I really wasn't quite sure what all you were trying to get out of that data.
So teacher-student link, it's our first time to use this data, so we're open to have any suggestion from the board. We're not sure whether we need really this teacher-student link, but this all test score and like course taking behavior, because we cannot observe whether the students was in the top 10% before TTP, it's really important to have the extensive student level characteristics to predict whether the students was really within the top 10% of each school. So as far as I know from the previous literature, we learned that whether the student was in the top 10% of each school is the variable that is included only after TTP was implemented.
You can only find out if they're in the top 10 by the application to higher ed, and is pretty much is where the data is.
Correct.
Yes.
So I was reading it that they were trying to create some kind of proxy, but I wasn't sure exactly how they were going to do that. It seems like, Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, this project requested pretty much the full gamut of data from TEA and coordinating board. Is that, again, I don't have it in front of me, but I think I had a note.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I think Celeste, you're on the right track, that in terms of data requests, it feels like it's not exactly clear how you plan to use the K-12 data as that proxy. Is that something that, would it be helpful to have a little more background on the data to try to sort out what is needed and what isn't for your purposes?
Yeah, exactly. And also we're going to replicate the methodology from one paper that also used this use this Texas data. And because this top 10% variable is not there before this TTP was implemented, they basically just lump all the K-12 level student characteristics in the regression to see which variables can predict this top 10% most well.
So maybe
I understand. So it was basically using all variables. Was it using but I think about teacher link, those type things maybe, as opposed to the student variables might not be needed.
No, yeah, I think you are right on the point. Teacher student link, we might not need it. I mean, we are not sure that what this K-12 data includes, because again, it's our first time to use this data. But teacher student link, I don't think we need it there.
Yeah, it feels like there might be a need for for you to do a deeper dive into what's available and how it ties into the project. I'm gonna see if Linda Roska is there. Linda, would you agree that or do you think it would be pretty straightforward for us now as a board to go through and make a determination about what would help them, based on her explanation that it's, kind of, let's put in all the student characteristics we've got and see what can help to predict.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we can try it here. And see if we can
I'm
get
open
through.
to that. It'll keep the project moving. If everyone agrees, basically, if no one has any concerns about the projects and research questions themselves, it can save us having to review at a later time and help move it forward. So I'm game. Or the other thing we could do is we could approve contingent that TEA, that we will sit down, that coordinating board and TA will sit down with the researchers. If the advisory board gives us approval to do that, we could sit down with the researchers and make a determination for what is needed. And then, if the board gives us permission, we could just approve that piece for the TEA data.
So Julie?
Either way. Yeah.
And I'll certainly take the researchers' word for their expectation that the student-teacher links themselves are not likely to be important to this exercise. But I wanted to step back and relate, and the research team will correct me if I'm incorrect, that the exercise here isn't so much to use any of these characteristics as a proxy, but to compose a linear predictor from these combinations. And what I would suggest that in that context, rather than trying to intuit which ones might have some predictive power, what they're hoping to do is an empirical exercise where they use the data to learn what combination and in what weights these characteristics can have some role in predicting top 10% status, and that often that's an austerely empirical exercise. So I don't know how productive it is in the context of that and what they're hoping to do, to sort of walk through and try to intuit what the contribution of that prediction would be, variable by variable. I think that would be very much kind of missing the point of the analysis they're hoping to do.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think we were thinking just the straightforward, the teacher information, feeling like that, that doesn't seem necessary, and maybe we could simply just say to remove that, but that we understand why all of the student information would be there, and that would make it very easy for us to just say to remove the teacher information. Did anyone see anyone else that really wouldn't tie into this methodological approach? Because Greg, I understand that makes sense. I always get a little cautious when every bit of data is requested if it's not clearly needed for the approach.
Well, Julie, you would be the one to say about the higher ed, but I don't know about the facilities, the rooms, and continuing ed classes, things like that.
Those are the same things that.
Just speculating intuitively, whether a student is in the top 10% of a school may depend on characteristics of the student, but also characteristics of the school, because we're talking about a relationship.
But the rooms, the facilities, and where the rooms are assigned, I mean, I think that's kind of a big stretch, Greg. I can certainly see the outcomes, but that would be an awful lot of work to be building in, what types of classrooms are there and how many students are in each classroom. And if that is the intention of the researchers, that's fine. But again, it's asking for everything when, even for the methodology you're talking about, it might not be necessary. So thanks, Celestia. I don't have it in front of me. I just had a note that it was asking for pretty much everything. I personally would be most comfortable with just doing a quick review of that, and perhaps if the committee would allow that if they're considering approval, that it would be contingent on TEA and THECB working with Greg to approve that files are appropriate. What do others think? Linda, would you be comfortable with that, or are you comfortable with just say remove the teacher data and we're okay, and I could say remove the facility data and we're fine?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
But just removing the, okay.
Yeah, just removing. Yeah.
Okay, let's remove the teacher data. Let's remove the facilities data, because Greg, I just don't see the connection there. And then I think the rest all make sense. Okay, do we have a motion along those lines from anyone? And this would also be, it would be for approval without those two stated data sources, and it would be for remote access.
This is Kathy. I'll move to approve with the amended removal of the two identified data sources, and the motion, not movement, is both for the proposal and for remote access.
Okay.
I'll second.
Do we have a second?
Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thanks for joining us. It's interesting study. Good luck with it.
Thanks for the suggestion and thanks for approval. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good afternoon. Okay, we have worked our way now through all of the new projects and the extensions and data projects. As I want to make a quick change, because we do have a researcher with us who is going to have to leave for a meeting at 3. And so I'm going to ask that before we go to the UH remote access projects, which are coming up next, I'm going to quickly move to, whoops, here we go. We have Commissioner Directive Remote 24, which is on the bottom of the list, which is Dr. Karen Wilcox, I think, is with us. It's for data modeling, visualization, and digital analytics for educational and career pathways in Texas higher education. And because this is not a project that the advisory board has seen in the past, because it's not remote access, again, for a project that's already been approved, I wanted to ask Karen if she would say a word or two about this project. This is with UT Austin, and it's a commissioner directive from Commissioner Keller at the coordinating board. Karen, are you with us?
I am, and can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, and thank you for moving me up. This is a project that's going to be exploring the application of scalable data modeling, data visualization, and digital analytics. And the goal is to support better decision making by stakeholders that include students, institutional stakeholders, and policymakers, and particularly targeting students' educational and careers pathways. So we're going to be using a network modeling approach to develop educational maps, and these maps are represented mathematically as graphs, and then use the computational methods of analytics and visualization that sit on top of graph models. We're going to be targeting as primary outcomes, first of all, exploration of de-identified student pathway data that really illustrates the types of analysis and visualization that can be enabled by this kind of a network-based mapping with the graph models. Second, we'll be looking at making some specific recommendations and identifying requirements for doing this kind of network-based modeling at scale. And then third, we'll be looking at making some recommendations for future steps in tool iteration or design that, again, support the decision-making. So really, this is a prototyping project data to really start to explore what will be possible. And I should have started by introducing myself. So I'm Karen Wilcox, I'm engineering, but I have in the past worked on some educational projects. So this will be a new experience working with Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and I'm really looking forward to kicking it off.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments for Karen? One thing I do want to add, Karen, and this is something that's on our agenda for later in the meeting. I know you're not going to be able to be with us, but this board is actually going to begin discussing, or continue actually, some early conversations around guidelines for commissioner-directed projects today. So any approval, of course, would need to meet those guidelines as they are developed. So I just did want to mention that, provided the other advisory board members are comfortable at this point. Obviously, we haven't finalized anything, but just thought I should mention that work is beginning on the part of this board.
Okay, very good.
All right, any questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion? And this one is, of course, just for remote access. It's not for project approval. Do we have any comments or questions or a motion?
If there are no questions, I'll move to approve. Greg Branch.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second, Gary.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Congratulations, remote access is approved, Karen.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you all.
You're welcome. And now I'm going to move back, and we do have the item here, and I spoke to this in my earlier remarks because I know we talked a little bit about remote access related to some of those earlier University of Houston proposals that were new proposals, but also included remote access. But I did want to, I will quickly share again the approval process that we have the meeting coming up tomorrow with representatives from U of H, technical experts from the coordinating board, technical experts from the Department of Information Resources, where they will review the technical aspects of the ERC. They will review all of the technical guidelines that were developed in the meetings that we had last spring, the guidelines that were approved by the advisory board to be submitted to the commissioner that, of course, he accepted, and the rule change, which went to the coordinating board. So as I mentioned before, this advisory board did not actually officially approve the other two ERCs. They approved the guidelines that an ERC would have to meet, and then we made sure that those guidelines were met and documented moving forward. So we will be considering each of these proposals contingent upon approval of those of the remote access being allowed at the University of Houston after we do go through the process of reviewing all the components as we did for the other two ERCs. So any questions or comments about that before we move forward? Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay. And then we're going to handle these the way we handled the remote access request for the projects that had already been reviewed and approved. You will see that the first two are the ones that we discussed earlier in the meeting and you did approve, and then we'll move on from there. We're going to take these 5 at a time. However, we'll have discussion on any projects that you see on the screen, and then if there are concerns, we'll address that project directly. Otherwise, we'll take a motion for all of the projects that are grouped on each slide, so we can move through this quickly. So I'm going to start and ask if the advisory board has any questions or comments on these first 5 remote access proposals at the University of Houston. Okay. If not, do we have a motion for approval contingent upon UH being approved to offer remote access to the ERC?
This is Celeste. I motion to approve, given the still discussions about it being approved as a remote access site.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Greg Branch, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and I just realized that because some people might have called in and might not be able to see the video, I'm going to read each of these projects quickly that were just proposed, and I'll read just so if people are listening and they can hear and we've got it in the record. So remote 1 is UH 002, assessing the effectiveness of educator preparation programs. Remote 2 is UH 003, student mobility and continuously enrolled predictors, patterns, and consequences. UH 005, evaluating Rice STEM professional development. Remote 4, long-term English language learners, predictors, patterns, and outcomes. Remote 5, UH7, effect of local incarceration on children's education outcomes. So those are all approved, contingent on UH remote access approval. And then the next group, we have remote 6008, the Texas Public Pre-K program and middle school student performance, long-term benefits, and possible explanation for fade out. Remote 7, UH10, Relay Graduate School of Education Impact Analysis for Texas Teachers. Remote 8, UH11, Evaluation of the Community Youth Development Program in Texas. Remote 9, UH12, Evaluation of the AgriLife Extension Rural Student Success Initiative. And Remote 10, UH13, Assessing the Texas Higher Education Grant Programs, describing current use of state grant programs and the effect of potential policy changes. Okay, any comments or questions here? I actually had one for remote 7, UH10. This is the Relay project where they're actually evaluating Relay Graduate School. One thing we talked about in our meetings about remote access is thinking about who the researchers were, the information we get about researchers. And for this particular project, we don't have researchers who are affiliated with an institution of higher education. These are researchers at the bachelor's degree level, so these are not graduate students, and there's several researchers, and this project just has a couple of months left until it's done. And so I wanted to see if the advisory board is comfortable with approval of this project. I know you all got to see the background information, but again, it's several folks working on this. They do have background in statistics and doing this type of work, but I thought since it appears that the project is just about finished, is it necessary to have remote access for all of the researchers? And I don't know if you could speak to that, Kathy.
I can. The researchers who are listed here are part of an evaluation organization that that Relay has contracted with, so that there's a separation of folks at Relay who have more intimate knowledge of people and the work being done. So I think that with respect to the need, they are trying to wrap up the project. So I do think that the remote access would be valuable for them. And although, as you point out, some only have bachelor's degree backgrounds, they are all well-versed in statistics or data analytics.
Have they been on site quite a bit?
They have.
They
have.
Researchers have been working all along on the project.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Great. No, thank you. That's helpful. Okay. Anyone else have any comments or questions? And I think my numbers here, my numbers might be off track if I gave the wrong numbers for that project, but you know the one that I mean for Relay.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then do we have a motion for approval of the projects that we see on the screen that were just listed for remote access, contingent upon approval for University of Houston to allow remote access to the ERC?
Greg Branch here. I'll move to approve agenda items remote 6 through 10, namely U of H 8, 10, 11, 12, and 13. For remote access, contingent on approval for the ERC.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. These 5 projects are approved. And we'll move on to the next screen. And this is remote 11, UH 15, the long arm of the law, understanding the influence of the Texas Top 10% Plan on law school admissions and enrollments. Remote 12, UH 16, the effects of student loans on college and labor market outcomes. Remote 13, UH 017, a longitudinal study of individuals who ever worked in the child care sector in Texas. Remote 14, UH 018, impacts from financial aid shocks, regression discontinuity evidence from changes to automatic zero EFC eligibility. And remote 15, UH 020, career and technical education, CTE. Okay, do we have any comments or questions regarding remote projects 11 through 15? I did want to say for remote 14, Kathy, this is a researcher who's at a Federal Reserve Bank, but it was indicated on the proposal that person is a graduate student, a PhD student, but there was nothing, I didn't see a bio for this one. Do you have any background on that one?
Pull it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. If you'll give me, let me go back really quickly, Julie, and confirm what I think is the case here. But I don't want to hold people up, so if we could pause on that one, and I'll come back to it.
Sure, that sounds great. I didn't have anything else on these 5. Does anyone have anything on these projects? If not, do we have a motion to approve these 5 projects contingent on approval of remote access at UHERC?
Greg Branch here. I'll move to approve agenda remote 11 through 15, U of H 15, U of H 16, U of H 17, U of H 18, U of H 20.
Do we have a second? Oh, you know what? We're leaving you at, I'm sorry, we're leaving off remote 14 at the moment. So it's 15, 16, 17, and 20. Thank you. Maybe you just leave that off.
Should I restate the motion?
Actually, could I pause because I confirmed my memory. I didn't want to misspeak.
Thank you. Great.
So this applicant or this approved project is being undertaken by a person who's a student at Vanderbilt. So he's still active as a PhD student, but it looks like he's just taken a professional position while he's completing his PhD.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. All right, Greg, I'm okay with leaving the motion as it stood, including remote 18, if others are. And then do we have a second for approval of these 5 projects as Greg moved?
I second. This is Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. These 5 remote access projects are approved, contingent on UHERC approval for remote access. Okay, I think I'm going to need to be an auctioneer because in terms of the speed here. All right, remote 16, UH21, calming the winds of the perfect storm and opportunity for advancement in teacher effectiveness evaluation. Remote 17, UH22, student sensitivity to price, a tale of 2 states, guaranteed tuition plans. Remote 18, UH23, assessing the impact of STEM intervention programs on post-secondary and workforce outcomes, a longitudinal analysis. Remote 19, 024, differential racial ethnic predictive validity of written expression, curriculum-based measurement, WE-DBM, and automated WE-CBM, AWE-CBM. Remote 20, UH025, exploring educational risk and protective factors in a large cohort of court-involved youth. Okay, do we have questions or comments on these 5 remote access applications? Kathy, on UH25, the bottom one, there's access to fairly sensitive court data, but my understanding is that the researchers just get that through the ERCs. That's not something they would have that we said they wouldn't have access because it was at the ERCs. They actually don't have access to that data. Is that correct? It's just through the ERCs?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions? Okay, if not, do we have a motion regarding approval of these 5 projects contingent on UH approval for the ERC for remote access?
Sure. I move to approve remote access 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 for remote access contingent on U of H's approval for remote access.
Do we have a second?
Greg Branch, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Remote access is granted and contingent on UH approval. And then we just have 3 projects left here that need to be addressed. This is remote 21, UH26, a longitudinal study of the impact of IDEA, Part C on educational outcomes. Remote 22, UH027, National Research and Development Center on English Learners, policy study on tracking and class composition. Remote 23, UH028, Beyond Texas School Walls, understanding the impact of exclusionary discipline practice on long-term academic and economic outcomes. Do we have any questions or concerns about these 3 remote access requests?
Julie, this is Kathy. May I also, either now or separately, remind with gratitude the request for the 2 projects that were approved today that didn't include remote access to also be considered for remote access, which was totally my fault.
Okay, those weren't the first 2?
They weren't, no.
So this is, okay, I was thinking those were the first 2 that came up, but that's, got it. I got confused. I thought Linda had already included those. Yes, why don't we include those in this grouping? So that's Proposal 1, UH29, towards greater accountability, a study of reading achievement among students with disabilities in elementary school. And Proposal 2, UH30, exploring the changes and impacts of demographic representation of the Texas STEM teaching workforce.
And as I said, the exclusion of that remote access paperwork was totally my fault. not theirs.
No, you had a lot of paperwork for this meeting. I understand it was lots of work for you, and I apologize that we didn't get the slides to include that in the correct order. Okay, do we have any comments or questions regarding, again, remote 21, 22, and 23, and also the initial proposals 1 and 2 that were on the, and it's 029, 030 for remote access. If, and oh, I guess I should look at my notes. And okay, and I assume that for 21, the 026, the Texas, the policy lab at Rice, that they do not have access to this supplemental data. Correct. It's still okay. Again, when it's sensitive data, we want to be very careful with remote access.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion regarding the 5 proposals that I just listed for approval for remote access contingent on the ERC remote access being approved?
Greg Branch here. I'll move that we approve agenda items remote 21 through 23. That's U of H 26, 27, and 28 for remote access, and also the remote access associated with proposal 1 UH 29 and proposal 2 UH 30 for remote access contingent on approval of the U of H ERC for remote.
Do we have a second?
I'll second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes, and the last of the remote access on that list was approved, and we actually have one more, and that is, let's see, I'm going to move to this one. This is the UT Austin Commissioner Directive 1601 TEA. This is a project that we delayed. We basically tabled at the September meeting. It's a reimagining student capacity and undercovering high performance schools. This is the project that has been underway since 2016 at the UT Austin ERC. It's the ERP project, and we had asked for questions from all of the folks who were requesting remote access, and we had a few additional questions for this particular organization, and those were provided to everyone, I believe, last night regarding remote access for this project. One of the concerns that we had, and as we were looking at the initial answers to the questions, is that some of us had an understanding that there were some additional projects that had been occurring where the ERC data was being used, and that wasn't clear in the answers. So you will now have a list of the projects that have occurred. Hopefully everyone saw those. And I would like to, first of all, let me open it up and see if there's any questions or comments, and then I'll weigh in with a couple of comments. Okay, well, after looking at the materials submitted and thinking through some of the questions that the advisory board members were asking at the last meeting, I wanted to make a suggestion for approval of remote access that would look a little bit different than just a straight out approval to continue the project, because this is a project that has been going on for a long time, and it has involved a lot of different components, a lot of different pieces. And as you know, we have on our agenda to discuss guidelines for commissioner-directed projects. Again, those are the projects that are allowable by statute and by rule to go to an ERC for a commissioner at one of the 3 agencies, TEA, the coordinating board, or TWC, to send a project to the ERC. And as long as it meets as long as the folks requesting the project are able to pay the fees, and it fits in within, you know, what's allowable for ERC work under statute, then the project is taken by that ERC and is accepted. And I think as we're seeing data used in different ways, and we're seeing it expanding, you know, we've talked about dashboards for these type of projects in the past. We understand that now folks are doing, looking at AI, they're doing a whole range of different types of projects with data. I think even the one we just looked at earlier from Dr. Wilcox has, you know, kind of a different twist than how we've seen the types of research going on. It seems important to have some guidelines for these projects, particularly now that by rule, this advisory board does have the authority to approve remote access for them. So given that we're kind of in this interim space where we're going to be talking about remote access, but I think it's going to take us a little, I mean, we're going to be talking about remote access for commissioner-directed projects, but I think it's going to take us a little time to think through guidelines, and I'm guessing probably at least till our March meeting, though of course we'll begin the discussion in a few minutes. I wanted to propose that for this project, we allow remote access for continuation of populating the dashboards that ERP has been working on as part of this project, and that's really the recent project that they've been working on with Texas 2036, is populating a series of dashboards to answer questions about higher education. So, but in the materials submitted, there were also proposed expansions of some of the work that they're doing. So to me, it made sense to think about allowing remote access to continue and to update those dashboards that have been populated in the past with newer years data, but then to wait for any additional remote access approval until guidelines are in place, because some of the other work going on does sort of expand beyond the types of things that we see typically with commissioner-directed projects, and by that time we'll have guidelines in place. So that was my first suggestion, and the other suggestion, just to make sure, because we would be putting a limitation on the type of data that could come out, again, data to populate those dashboards. The other suggestion I had would be to do what we have done with a project in the past, would be to require that the coordinating board and TEA review the data before final release. So after it's gone through the process at the UT Austin ERC from Celeste and been approved, Linda Roska and I would have the opportunity to look and make sure it meets this guideline. So that's a lot to say. Let me open it up for questions and comments and see if others feel like that's a good way forward at this point in time while we wait to develop and then finalize our guidelines for commissioner-directed projects. And I know we've had a long meeting.
So Julie, I guess I would just share that my personal, I guess, attitude towards these kinds of questions is that the commissioner-directed projects provide a way for the ERC structure to be useful to the agencies kind of outside of the normal research and evaluation project stream that the DAB normally evaluates. And as the agencies are who supports and provides the data for the program and so on, I think one interesting distinction to make perhaps is commissioner-directed projects that are using only data from the agency that is requesting the project versus projects that might use a wider range of data from multiple agencies. If it's the sort of case where, for instance, the THECB is requesting someone to do a project using THECB data, they're really trying to leverage the work that's already been done by them in providing data through the ERC program to have a project done that they would otherwise provide data for. And so, in terms of feeling like that there's a need for some external body to approve the use of that data when we're talking about data that is data the agency could as well provide the researcher, it seems as though to me, that should be a benefit of the ERCs to the agencies. It gets a little more complicated if we're talking about projects that require data from multiple agencies. I kind of have always felt that that's a matter, guidelines for those kinds of projects are kind of a matter between the agencies when we're talking about, a project that one particular agency wants done or wants to have done. The remote access question is interesting. I guess what I would throw out there relative to the remote access question in this context is, under conditions of the COVID resurgence, we're in a place where, in many cases, if we don't have remote access, the project in practical terms is not going to be done.
Correct.
I think we're in a place at UT Dallas where I'm not allowed to admit non-UTD personnel to our facility. So, if the sort of case where the agencies agree that a project should be done, but we're not willing to grant remote access, is kind of an interesting case in our circumstances. I think at the front end of all of this, I think many of us were kind of assuming, and when we started going through reopening procedures, we were all kind of assuming that this COVID condition would be very finite, and then we've had resurgences and so on. And we're in a place now where not so much lockdown, but social distancing, various policies of risk mitigation are a very open-ended thing at this point. There's not an end in sight. Various people are saying optimistic things, but I think we have to anticipate for the foreseeable, the conditions will be that a project for which remote access is not approved is for all intents and purposes blockaded. And I just wanted to throw this out there as considerations.
I think that's very helpful, and actually that's two things. I mean, that's part of why as I was thinking about this project, that again is an unusual one. I thought that certainly for now, allowing remote access to continue that core work, and certainly if you remember the paperwork that submitted the core work of populating those dashboards, to allow that for remote access as of today would allow that opportunity when there isn't another opportunity for this particular project. I think your comments about the agencies that provide the data, they were absolutely in line with the type of discussion I think we want to be having about commissioner-directed projects, because I think there are different levels of access, and I think there are projects where it's easier for an agency to ask for access to an ERC for a project that just involves their data, perhaps in some instances, than to go through the agency. And that's different than a project that might pull in data from all of the agencies. And so I think that's just the type of topic we can talk about around guidelines. And the other thing I did want to mention is, though, of course, this decision, and then I think we should move to the guideline discussion if we can sort of resolve what we need to for this project. But I do feel like with commissioner-directed projects, as we've seen some changes in expansion, and you can remember the list we had before, and you might also remember that for the on-course project, we said no to one component because we wanted to think about it more, as well as this project where we asked them to come back for more information. But I think as we're seeing data used differently and research and defined kind of differently, as well as studies and evaluation, we really need to be sure that we are being true to the ERC statute and rules as we think about any projects that are going through them. And you're probably aware that the commissioner of the coordinating board does have oversight and sort of final say in policy and those types of things. And I think there is an interest in maybe having some guidelines. So as we see some of these unusual projects come through, because of course the letters come to me from commissioners and I send them forward, it'll be helpful, I think, to have a little more information about what the projects are all about, just to make sure they fit within what's in the statute. So I think that part of the reason we're having the conversation is because of the remote access, and this board does have that authority for those projects. But part of it is, we are seeing changes in how data are being used, and we want to think carefully about any project moving forward to make sure that we're meeting requirements, statutory and FERPA and all of that. So that said, why don't we bring it back to the topic at hand? unless folks feel like we need to have a larger discussion about the guidelines. But I would say, as came up with the Dr. Wilcox project, that we could have it. We could allow for remote access until such time as guidelines are finalized, but then also indicate that the guidelines would need to be followed moving forward. So any comments, again, specifically on this project and the materials that you've seen, and a proposed approach that would be, again, allowed access for the components, the ongoing components for the dashboards, but not for some of the additional project work. Okay, well, does someone have another suggestion, or are people comfortable with that approach? Again, as a way for us to move forward, discuss guidelines, but again, especially given COVID, allow for this project to have remote access, which does require approval. But I think we all did have some concerns, if you remember the discussion at the last meeting.
That works for me.
Okay.
So right now we're just.
And I appreciate that, Linda, since it's since the project came from TEA. Thanks. Celeste, would that
just right now we're just approving it for updating their dashboard. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we got the list of there were several dashboards that ERP is working on with Texas 2036, tied back to the research, and those are the dashboards that they listed in terms of what they have provided at this point. And I believe it's a priority for ERP to be able to update those dashboards with more recent data from the ERC. So again, that's a project that has been ongoing and isn't something additional. So that would be what the approval would be for. Does that? And we could point back to that list of dashboards and indicate that the approval would be for those that were provided as on the list of the ongoing work that they gave us in September.
That plus that you and Linda would look over their results.
Yes.
Addition, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And the only other thing that I thought about, and I'll let Linda weigh in on this because I think this is a flexible thing and this would be something to look to TEA. Right now for the dashboards, ERP has actually had a little higher standard than we have normally for these projects because they are building dashboards, which is different than providing the type of study results we normally see. And so they actually don't remove data unless there's at least 10 students per cell. But I know that a lot of folks and this is something we can talk about also when we have our overall discussion, but I know that as more and more data is out there, it can be easier to try to pull different data sources together to try to identify students. So I do know some folks are starting to move to a little bit higher counts. So Linda, are you comfortable with the 10, or is there a number that you think would be more appropriate at this point in time, or are you comfortable with leaving it here for now until we have guidelines?
We've talked internally about moving to 25 for some of our projects. I'm not familiar with all of the dashboards that this is going to affect, so I don't know what the effect that would have on this work.
Okay.
So
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to see if we have someone with us who could tell us from ERP who could tell us if the 25 at this point would be a challenge, or if that's something that would work at this point in time.
Dr. Eklund, this is Elliot Lopez. I'm the CIO and Chief Operating Officer at ERP. We don't, this is not a question that was presented to us prior to this meeting, so we can't make any determination as to what impact that would have, but I just wanted to make sure that it's clear with the board here that we do abide by all FERPA requirements and have never had any instances or concerns raised to our attention surrounding the inappropriate release or identification of student data in any of the tools that we've developed thus far.
Thank you. No, appreciate that. Okay. Well, that said, it sounds like we have some folks who are in agreement in terms of approval for remote access, specifically for population of the dashboards from the list that was provided by ERP, again with the additional review from TEA and THECB, given that this is a little shift, so to ensure that that's what's occurring moving forward. Do we have a motion or any other comments or concerns on the part of the advisory board before we move into our more general discussion?
If there are no other questions, I'll move to approve the remote access for UTA Commissioner Directive 16-01 TEA, subject to a review of results by TEA and THECB, and limited to the updating of the dashboards as enumerated in the application.
Do we have a second?
Kathy, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes, and so we do have approval for remote access for ERP for updating those dashboards as enumerated in the proposal with the additional review. Okay, thank you for joining us, Elliot. And now we're going to move on to, I think, the last item on our agenda, and we fortunately still have a little bit of time. Well, first we have potential guidelines for commissioner-directed projects, but I think I did skip over one thing I want to quickly bring folks back to, because we did have an item discussion and consideration for approval of proposed additions to the advisory board policies overall in remote access. This is something that came up earlier about researchers who are out of the country, and we said we'd go ahead and write something up to propose to the commissioner to add to the guidelines for remote access. And so the language we have in yellow, hopefully this will be brief, basically just reflects that discussion from our earlier meeting, that the researcher who's been approved, a researcher who has been approved for remote access must not access ERC data when traveling outside the U.S. or the territory. So this is sort of an expansion of the policy we approved. Researchers who are located outside the U.S., such as our researcher from the university in Canada today, we don't allow access in that circumstance, but we also would not allow access if a researcher in the U.S. with approval was traveling outside of the country. So that was one thing that came up. And the other thing that was shared, and I think this was Adam Leonard, was the concern that if there were researchers who were, especially the PI was out of the country, and there are researchers in the country who are approved for access, possibly research assistants, we wanted it to be clear that anyone who's working on a project cannot share data with someone who might happen to be out of the country, if it's PII, and if it's data within the ERC. Data can only be shared after it has been approved for release, and we wanted to include that research assistants should be advised of this policy, because there was a little bit of concern that research assistants might be pressured to share what they're seeing or show their screens, those type of things, and we want it to be very clear that only folks who have been approved for access can be in the student level data. So anyone have any questions or comments about these policies and the way we've tried to reflect them in this draft for you? And I don't think this is pressing. If you want to postpone it to the next meeting, we just did tell you we'd try to put something together. So.
It looks perfectly fine to me. With respect to the last bullet, I have no objection to the addition of that language to the policies and to the agreement. It seems as though, and I've expressed this before, that that particular restriction seems to me to be covered by the agreements and policies that we already have in place. It's difficult to see how someone could engage in the activity that's addressed by that bullet without violating things we already have. But we have no objection to the addition.
Okay, I can see that. We since we did have an advisory board member raise it and was concerned to specifically mention it, I think was his intention. So it's very clear, and these are policies that we know our researchers review when applying for remote access. It'll be very clear to everyone what the expectations are. All right, anyone else have any questions or concerns? I am certainly open to a motion for approval to, again, advance this to the commissioner as a recommended addition to the guidelines, or if folks would like to think about it more, I think we're, the possibility for delaying till the next meeting is here as well. Any final thoughts? And if not, feel free to make a motion either way or along some other lines.
Julie, this is Kathy. I would move to approve.
Is now exiting.
I didn't exit, but
oh, okay.
I could. No, I move to approve for recommendation the additional language related to accessing data outside of the United States and advising research assistants of responsibilities.
Okay.
Great,
do we have a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? If not, motion passes. And Angie, can you please share this with Adam? I wanted to make sure he was able to see our.
Yeah, I will.
This approach, since he is the one that suggested we needed to add a little more here. Okay, and then let's move on to the guidelines for Commissioner Directed projects, or sometimes referred to as directive projects. And I think, Greg, you started us off well with some very helpful comments, I think, about the types of things to consider, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of open it up to the floor to see if there's anything else that folks feel we should talk about at this point related to the commissioner-directed project. In fact,
this is Celeste. I have a few just that we've had to deal with in the past is time periods on when it's a directive. Sometimes they aren't specific at when it ends, if it ever ends. And then other times there hasn't been specific data requests. So we've had to just allow pretty much anything. And it's easier if there's some guidance on that.
Okay, so time frame. And as most of you are aware, our general time frame is for 2 to 3 years. Most projects come in for, and then we allow extensions, occasionally 5, and then we allow extensions up through 5, and then we expect to see a new request come in. Would that type of guideline be something we might want to propose for commissioner-directed projects, so we don't have something open-ended where you could see changes in leadership at agencies or other things occur, and if something's open-ended, it becomes harder to track. So I think that's a good thought, Celeste.
Julie, with respect to whether or not there should be time limits and those kinds of things, once again, I'm entirely agnostic, because to me these are the kinds of things that the agencies probably want to come to an agreement about. As a practical matter, I will second the suggestion that perhaps there should be a standard whereby these things have a approval period, whether it's a very long one or a short one, or if it's indefinite, state that it's indefinite, and then also enumerate the authorized data, simply because our auditors don't know what to do with project authorizations that don't have those details.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It certainly, in terms of the documentation side that you folks have to work with auditors, I think having a little more detail, because of course they're looking to make sure all of the requirements are met for the ERC, and not just projects that come through the advisory board, but any projects that you have to manage. So I think that makes some sense. So I know Angie and Linda are there. Do you think it would be appropriate to talk about a 2 or 3 year, or talk about that we just need the proposal to indicate an amount of time, and that it can't be more than 5 years, just, without a renewal? And certainly with the 2 or 3 years, that could be set up that it could be renewed simply with an additional commissioner letter. Does that seem like an appropriate guideline for those of you at other state agencies?
Yes, there should be a time frame. I'm fine with making sure we state a time frame in the directive letter.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds good as well.
Okay. Do we need to settle on one now, or are people comfortable with that at maybe just the 5 year point? 5 years would be the most, but it should be stated anytime up to 5. So it could be 4, it could be 1, whatever it might be, but that at 5 years, a new directive would need to be sent. Again, if it's the same research questions, reiterating those if something has changed. Does that seem fair?
Yes.
And appropriate? Okay.
As a draft decision, I'm fine with that. I need to take this back to my leadership, of course.
Yeah, same here. Yes, and we're just talking right now. We are just proposing ideas, I think, in this meeting, and then we can move forward with sharing. I think we could put some things together today. I'm happy to try to type it up, and then we could share it out with the advisory board, and that would allow state agencies to share it with their leadership. And of course, I can do the same. Okay, Greg, you brought up the idea about projects that use an individual agency's data or other agencies' data. I was thinking, and you were saying, that really is up to the agencies. I was thinking at the time that maybe there's some kind of guideline that allows for, if provided it meets the requirements for the ERC, which is, which I think would be these guidelines that, I'm thinking about if it's an agency's own data, that shouldn't be something where you need to be concerned about other agency approval. But because we're seeing, again, very different types of projects, and you've seen several of them, perhaps building something in where the agencies can have some discussion, and should an agency raise a concern, it could be taken back to for legal consultation or something like that. Because the idea isn't this is going to put more. I think the idea is we just want to make sure there's guidelines so that the ERC requirements are met, that we're meeting requirements for the ERC, and if everyone's on board, great. But if we feel like someone is uncomfortable, it would be that for data that's not their agencies, then we would have a mechanism to bring something back for legal review or something like that. Does that? I'm trying to get my head around what it might look like here. Greg, does that seem? We're basically, if there's some kind of disagreement, or maybe it goes to the commissioners, but if there's some type of disagreement, there's a way to determine, have someone determine, does this project meet requirements, or does it not? Does that make sense?
I'm kind of wary of suggesting that the advisory board should be playing referee in a disagreement between state agencies. I think that's something I'd want to stay out of. But
yeah, no, that makes sense. That's why I'm thinking, a guideline. And again, this is wanting the advisory board, because the advisory board has remote access approval, and the advisory board has been working with the ERCs for years and understands the project. I think this is wanting to just get some feedback about guidelines that might be useful. So maybe that's one we maybe we think about a subcommittee to work on guidelines that would basically be the state agencies, or maybe the state agencies and have a representative from one of the ERCs. And so therefore we could have some feedback from you, because I do think you all do get involved with commissioner directed projects, and you do have to go through the process and review. And again, having some guidelines I think could be helpful as well. So does that seem like something to think about? Perhaps have a subcommittee as we did with remote access. And I hate to create more subcommittees if they aren't necessary. Linda, is that something that you think might be a good way to approach these guidelines, and then we could bring them back to the advisory board just to make them aware and to think about how it ties in with the remote access approval?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Can I add in a few more topics for discussion in that group?
Yes, please. Yeah, please do. That would be wonderful.
One issue that's come up, that we have guidelines for projects that have some commercial aspect to it. That again, if it's vague, it's hard to tell if that's what it is. For that, and I don't know if this would be under it, but the legislated, the HB 18 that occurred, it was pretty open-ended as well, but I don't know that there's anything to do about that, but it reminded me of a vague directive almost.
Yeah, I think having guidelines that really are around what's allowable, thinking about the ERCs and how they're structured, because there is, if you look at the language in the statute and the rules around commissioner directed projects, they still have to meet FERPA requirements. So, someone still has to be determining, is this a study or evaluation? Does this meet, and I know FERPA can be defined differently, but I think, that is why it might help to have a little bit of parameters, maybe some guardrails for these projects. And the idea wouldn't be trying to be more restrictive. The idea would be just determining, hey, what is appropriate for a project, and obviously if something legislated said you do not have to follow these particular aspects, and HB 18 said you don't have to go through the advisory board, but it didn't say the other pieces weren't there. So it feels like, to me, these guidelines will just be about making sure, as we see different types of projects, that they do fit what's allowable. So I would think that they would apply again in cases where legislatively the ERC wasn't directed to do something, and obviously FERPA, when you've got laws, laws must be followed, but it feels like that might be something to add in, or to think about as we talk about this, because I know that was a vague.
So Julie, you introduced an interesting distinction, and that is between the purposes of the ERC, the allowable purposes of the ERC per the statute, and uses of the data by an agency under FERPA. So I guess what I would suggest is that if we're talking about commissioner-directed projects, and whether or not a commissioner might direct the project in such a way that might contravene FERPA, I guess what I would suggest is that responsibility for that should be perhaps with the agencies that's directing the project. And I think that's distinct from the determination of whether something is an intended use of the ERC. Now, and what I would throw out there is that the 2013 version of the statute made explicit a fairly broad swath of allowable purposes of the ERC with respect to clarifying legislative intent. It's difficult for me to see what kinds of projects an agency might want to commission to be done that would fall outside of that range of things. It's a pretty broad range of things. The legislature created the ERC program to benefit the state. In operation, the agencies kind of represent the state in in that it's hard to see what an agency would want to have done that you would then say doesn't benefit the state. So,
well, quite frankly, there's benefit to the state, but there's also it's clear that there are legal requirements under FERPA that are specifically cited in the statute and rule, and I think that's the piece that's important, because you could say you can't imagine any project that couldn't be done. Well, absolutely, there's projects that might not, fit in. And again, FERPA is interpreted in different ways, but it feels like having guidelines would just help us to ensure that those key pieces. The other thing about the 2013 change is it does give authority for oversight of the ERCs to the coordinating board, and some of this is just due diligence to ensure that the ERC and the advisory board does have oversight over security of this data. So I think this is just guidelines to make sure we're all doing our due diligence, and that that we are meeting the appropriate requirements for this, with the understanding that there's quite a bit of breadth. But it just seems like it might help us moving forward, again, because we have had several different types of projects come up, and it will make it easier. So I do feel like, as you talk about, a lot of it's up to the agencies. I think the subcommittee is a very good idea. Linda has confirmed that. But maybe we should continue with anything else you as ERC directors think we should be discussing as part of that. I will add that the advisory board did ask if dashboards were being built. Remember, we set those couple of really high-level policies a couple of years ago. We discussed it in the September 2019 meeting. I think I had those on a slide, but basically they just say that a commissioner-directed project, if it is to build dashboards, it should be included in the language, and maybe guidelines will simply say, research questions should be clearly identified, and if a use, just so there's an understanding, even for the ERC director, as they're reviewing data, for what is this, what is the use, what is, the project all about. So I could imagine that just a little more clarity around that, as we see very different levels of detail on the commissioner-directed projects that come through. Some several pages, some a paragraph. So I think it would be, that in my mind might be something that would help all three of you. I'm seeing the three directors on the screen here, so I say all three. It's nice to see your faces in the same place. Would that make some sense to you? If we in the subcommittee we talk a little more about, just a little more information about what should be included in that commissioner directive? Yes, no, I'm seeing nodding. Anything else that you'd like us to discuss?
I think if there are things that should be worked out about this, the agency subcommittee, particular subcommittee, predominantly composed of the agency folks, is a great idea. I guess the other suggestion that I would make is that I would be very cautious approaching this in ways that created guidelines that would have the effect of ossifying what could be done to the benefit of the state, either in terms of methodological approach or in terms of dissemination mode, because these things do change, and there are opportunities for benefit that come along with innovations. And I think it would be a mistake to sort of crystallize things that are past or present, and sort of state of expectation around what analysis or study is, or how the results should be disseminated.
Thank you. No, that's good feedback. I think we will, we should be considering that. Things are changing fast, which is part of why we're having this conversation, but it's a very good reason to remember they're changing fast. So, you need to think carefully as you work through these things and how you characterize things, because a year from now, people will be doing new things with data. And so we will, I think that's a very helpful comment. And anything else for this subcommittee, we can have them report back at the next meeting, and we can share out with our materials for the next meeting and with the agenda materials a proposal. And again, I'm not anticipating something that's the breadth of the work that we did for remote access, because this is a different type of topic. It just felt like, as we were having to answer the question about remote access for these projects, that it, having some guidelines might help everyone moving forward. Okay. Linda and Angie, I'm going to ask you if there's anything else you want to add, and Linda, you already confirmed that you would be willing to serve on a subcommittee. Angie, is that something that TWC would be open to?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Great. And all right. Well then, any other questions or comments that to keep in mind? And I know, Gary, do you have anything as an advisory board member, as you've started to hear these projects come in for remote access, anything you'd like to have us consider?
Nothing at this point.
Thank you. And why don't we leave it open that, please email me if there is something any of you would like to also have us consider. Then do we have a motion? I think a motion would be in order to establish a subcommittee to bring back recommendations to this advisory board for guidelines for commissioner directed projects. Anyone?
This is Kathy. I'll move to request a subcommittee be formed to explore and make recommendations on the topic.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. We will establish a subcommittee and convene that committee from the coordinating board. So thank you very much for your feedback on this discussion. Again, we just want to do our due diligence moving forward, and appreciate everyone's participation. Another long meeting, but at least we didn't have to have any special called meetings between September and now. So everyone had a bit of a break. And then we'll all join together again. I think March 11th is or might not be the 11th. Linda will send out information. I think it's the second Thursday in March we were considering, but I know spring break, who knows what'll be happening with spring breaks and timing this year. So we'll make sure to give you an opportunity to weigh in. All right, well, hi, Linda, any other closing comments or remarks?
No.
If not, then thank you again all very much. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Gary.
Second?
I'll second.
Everyone seconds.
Everyone seconds. Yeah.
It's been nice to see everyone's faces. I really do appreciate that. It's been nice to see the researchers. So hopefully this Teams approach will work, since we've always had telephonic meetings. Hopefully it'll work long into the future, even when COVID is a distant memory. So again, and there's Gary. Thanks again, Gary, for joining us. Nice to actually see you in person for the first time, and have a great holiday, everyone. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.